So yeah, I'll be kicking off this round of updates on our findings from our projects. This is actually very happy occasion that we get to this point where we have findings really from all of our projects. This is something that we've been striving towards for like 4 years. So it's an occasion to celebrate. And just set this up here as well. Should also say that for this first project, we have been quite a team in this. It's been co-led by Yin Paradis, Professor Yin Paradis, and myself. But we have had quite a team from both universities. So we've had really, I'll maybe go around the room. I think half of the people. So Nida has been part of the project. Craig, Rachel, Kevin, Fethi, Emmanuel, Mandy, Jessica Walton, who was with ADI and is now with government. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Ayuba Isaka was part of this project in the early days. And to those of you who are maybe less familiar, hang on a second. We have been aware for quite some time that there's a lot of data on racism in Australia, a lot of data that's collected, but data seems quite limited in really important ways. And so we know that quality research and data are important for supporting and informing anti-racism. And there's some ways such as increasing awareness about racism, pushing for advocacy, and funding, informing policy and action, helping also people to articulate their experiences with racism. All of that has gained much more attention also from policymakers and other working on anti-racism in the last few years. But our ability to actually put all that data together, get a sense of what we have, what is missing, is fairly limited, and the data itself is limited as well. So still, nobody has reviewed this evidence base and consequently our knowledge of racism. And some of the questions for us with this project were, what do we know about racism in Australia? And especially based on quantitative data. What more do we need to know? And how can we better use this data? To answer this, we've conducted the first comprehensive review of our knowledge of racism, again, based on quant data. And to our knowledge, it's possibly the first one of its kind anywhere in the world, a stocktake of the data that exists in Australia, mostly survey data. And our review focuses on 32 national level studies, while we also had 16 studies that had a Victorian focus and were included in our previous report from last year. We also identified 6 national routine data collection initiatives by different organizations, and there's also 5, if I'm not mistaken, 5 that are Victorian focused on top of these 6 national ones. And we found that we have some data that we should further analyze. So there's quite a lot of data out there and it's being underutilized. For example, one thing we could and should learn more about are perpetrators' demographics. So we have this data, we have data about racism that is expressed by different people of different backgrounds, different demographics. But we haven't analyzed it as much as we should, and that will help us, obviously, in doing things like targeting particular interventions. And another one that is quite related to this is a question about how racism actually varies across different localities. We have, again, data about particular localities and data about racism, so we can break this data down and we can run these comparisons, but we haven't done it much yet. So again, the variation of racism geographically. And then another question we could be answering with the current data is about how experiences of racism affect health and economic outcomes. In addition to that, we also flag data that we are missing altogether and needs to be collected. And it includes data on the settings of racism. So, for example, online and sharing economy, there's really not much about that, although they're becoming so important in everyone's lives. Digital technologies that perpetuate racial bias, media, sports settings. Then there are forms of racism, and we've discovered that there's less on structural and vicarious racism than about interpersonal forms of racism, and we definitely need to be collecting these more and also more consistently. And there's not enough on forms such as racist harassment, unfair assumptions, hypervigilance, overpolicing, and securitization. And there's more in our report from last year and also an article that we just recently published on this. Then the cohorts who experience racism, we don't have much data about young people and migrant groups. So we're very much calling for more data collection, particularly on the experiences of those groups. Responses to racism, what do people actually do when they face racism? There's a couple of studies, some of them also with CRP data, but outside of that, there's very, very little, and something ongoing that could track responses over time will be much appreciated. And we also need more longitudinal studies, and that's something that has been identified also by the AHRC recently, and also other organizations. We also discuss in our work the limited capacity of routine initiatives. And that's something that we will be needing to enhance over the next few years. The project makes a few wider contributions as well. First of all, to policy and use of data. And first of all, been calling really for a research agenda and data management plan for better coordination, long-term direction, and resourcing of the racism research effort in Australia. We also call to mandate key agencies to collect, monitor, report, and address data on racism and racial ethnic disparities. From a more global perspective, we've proposed a review as a template for other stocktakes that seek to inform anti-racism in other countries. And this also includes research strategies by the UN, by the European Commission, also several governments, where they've specifically noted the important role that data should and already has played in anti-racism planning. Lastly, we call in this project to approach racism data as data for anti-racism. It's a bit of a reorientation to how we've been approaching racism data. This is an active reorientation that seeks to make it more useful and accessible beyond academia. We argue that researchers should make anti-racism the end goal of racism data collection. The data should address real needs and have tangible effects, and that it should originate collaboratively with groups who are affected, and that indigenous governance, sovereignty, and autonomy over data relating to First Nations people should be integral to any effort to challenge racism nationally. So I think with that, my presentation here comes to an end. These are our findings. I'm very happy to chat to anyone about this anytime. Thank you.